Do you know about Association of Indian Management Schools? It's a 34-year-old networking body of B schools in India, having a membership of about 600 top management institutions. AIMS focuses on professionalization of management education, protects interests of B schools, represents management institutions at national and international forums, financially supports members in academic events, funds research projects on management, disseminates management-related knowledge through its annual Management Education Convention, conferences, seminars, roundtables and workshops, organizes free weekly webinars on knowledge sharing and inspiring young leaders sessions for management faculty and students, supports B schools in admissions through Atma, AIMS test for management admissions. Visit https://atmaims.com for more details. Publishes a biannual AIMS Journal of Management. Visit https://aimsjournal.com for more details. Circulates a quarterly e-newsletter on AIMS activities. Conducts workshops on case writing. Encourages AIMS members to be part of decision-making processes as members of chapter management committees and the executive board. Encourages students' participation in free weekly quiz competitions by providing support to interested institutions. Facilitates networking and interaction among B schools. Why would you like to remain a non-member of AIMS? Pay a very low one-time membership fee and enjoy many lifetime benefits. Visit https://aims.org.in for more details.
On behalf of the Association of Indian Management Schools, I welcome the expert speaker today, Mr. Vinay Kumar, and all the participants on this webinar. A great session, the inspiring session on young leaders session on the art of storytelling and its relevance to management practice. AIMS, a professional body with the highest network of B schools, have been organizing such knowledge sharing sessions for the benefit of the stakeholders. Of course, the efforts of its president, Mr. Sudhir Sharma, and Dr. Narayan Reddy, the regional vice president, never goes wasted. The response is huge and immense. Today's session, which is close to the heart of everyone, the storytelling, the art of storytelling and its relevance to management practice. We all know that storytelling is an effective form of communication, especially in building great customer experience and a great relationship in the organization, especially building a great culture in the organization, like the Tatas, Google, etc. And also we are all inspired by great lessons or the stories on leaders who have inspired us in all times, like the Steve Jobs of Apple, Ursula Burns of Xerox, who have changed the face of their companies. And also educating young minds through stories is not a new way for Indians, especially Panchatantra is our all-time favorite, which a guru of ancient India have used. For diving deep into the session, today we have the speaker, Mr. Vinay Kumar, the founder and MD DATAWISE. He is a management practitioner who has nearly 30 years of rich experience running various companies in India and abroad, working with large audit and consulting firms like Ernst & Young, multinational companies, and with BPO operations. Also, he worked in various functional and leadership positions throughout his career and has good experience in the areas of consulting, strategy, and finance. He is the founder of DATAWISE, Inclusive Services and Technologies, ComSim, and Eternal Green. Together, these companies have employed more than 200 members as staff, mainly in the areas of consulting, research, technology, and analytics. He is also a non-executive director on the board of several companies such as Sandhu, Nexus, Ubuntu, besides being the board of Institute of Management Consultants of India and Insights Association. Thus, his rich experience is varied and would be adding to the discussions today. And before we invite our speaker today, may I remind you certain instructions for the participants, because you cannot unmute yourself during the session for the smooth running of the session. And you can post your queries, if any, into the chat box, which will be taken up at the end of the session during question and answer session. And the link for the feedback will be provided at the end of the session, which will be lasting for 15 minutes. And certificates will be issued to only those who submit the feedback forms online. With this, may I now request our speaker, Mr. Vinay Kumar, to take over. Over to you, sir, please. Welcome you, sir.
Professor Nair, Association of Indian Management Schools, Dr. Mehta, and all the people who are listening into this mode of conversation. I hope I'm audible to all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's my pleasure to address all of you, to talk to you. And it's a topic which is very dear to my heart, because I learned the hard way that the best way to tell something to somebody is through a story. For those of you who now know my background, I must also admit that I am a very, very poor student. I barely used to pass, and I was fearful of two subjects as a student in school. One subject was physics and one subject was mathematics. Now, as life would take you, I am now owning two companies, which is one into the complete area of physics and one completely into the area of maths. So life comes full circle. But I wanted to start with a small story about how I fell in love with physics. And those of you who come from a science background, you will all don't come from a science background, they'll all know that physics and maths can be very dry subjects, very difficult, very complicated. And unfortunately, I decided, or fate decided, that I should be a science student. So I remember when I was in class 3 or 4, my physics teacher at that time was trying to teach us the principles of transmission of heat. So those of you who probably remember your school physics will know that there are 3 methods of transmission. It is either convection, conduction, or radiation. And it for us at that age, it's a very complex subject to understand. So our teacher, physics teacher, he just took a duster, and he took the duster and he threw it to the last person sitting in the room. And he said, that is radiation. Then he took the duster back, gave it to the first person in the first row, and he said, please pass it to the next person, to the next person, and next person, and so on. And then he said, this is conduction. Then he said, the first person, please take the duster, get out of your seat, go to the last person and give the duster to him. And he said, that is convection. Now this he taught me 50 years ago, and I still cannot forget it. Not because it's a very easy subject to remember, but the way he told it continues to fascinate. That is the power of telling a story the right way. A lot of times, and unfortunately, I deal with numbers. My entire life is dealing with numbers only. A lot of people find it very difficult to comprehend numbers or make sense out of numbers. But imagine if I'm telling you the same thing through story and not through numbers. Suddenly, it all becomes very easy to understand. You must all have heard about the story of Ramanujan, the great mathematician. He used to make a story out of every number. When you talk about Fibonacci series, And I'm sure many of you have heard about Fibonacci series as a series of numbers. The best way to remember it is the floral patterns. A pattern of a flower is nothing but Fibonacci numbers. I'll go one step further. And I was having this debate with some of my colleagues here in the office. Do you all know where the best mathematicians of modern mathematics came from? They all came from, most of them came from Europe and UK. I'm talking about modern mathematics, not ancient mathematics. And all of them, none of them actually was a mathematician. They were all doing some other thing and accidentally came upon maths as a method to understand life. Charles Darwin, all of you know about Charles Darwin, right? Do you know that Charles Darwin was actually a mathematician? And it is his credit that he applied the knowledge of evolution to determine what should be the life of various living beings. He started with the study of a pea, and he said, I'll study what is the size of a pea and how does the size of a pea relate to the length of the plant. See the fascination with studying things around us. And the reason I'm putting all of this in context is we cannot escape those stories. Um, Dr. Nair gave a wonderful preamble by saying that you know all of it started. If we go back to our own childhood, all of us grew up on stories either from the Panchatantra or from our parents telling us something. Or again, I don't know how many of you do that, but even today, when you do Vinayaka Puja, at the end of the Vinayaka Puja, you have a katha. No, katha is what? It is 5 stories that are told to you. When you do Satyanarayana Katha, there are 5 kathas. So every one of the very traditional forms of prayer that we do typically end up with a katha. And this is by design, not by default. If some of you are very careful and are practicing the religion the right way, you would probably have heard this several times. They say, it doesn't matter if you are not there in the puja or not, but don't miss the katha. If you miss the katha, then it is going to be bad for you. Have some of you heard of it? I'm sure you have. Because you might forget what is happening in the puja. You might think that slokas are very difficult to understand. But what you do not understand from the slokas, you can very well understand from the kathas. I'm talking all this just to set context so that you all understand why this subject is so dear to all of us. But it is more important to understand this in the context of modern management practices. There are far bigger challenges in a management world that we deal with than merely storytelling. Today, we live in a very fast-paced world. Companies grow exponentially very fast. Markets change dramatically over time. How do you navigate through this entire process when it is so difficult to navigate? And that is where the art of storytelling helps us. So, with that, and with your permission, Dr. Nair, if I may, I have a few slides that I wanted to share and use that as a basis to further express my own thoughts. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
please, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So can I share?
Yes, sir, you can share. Yes.
Let me see. Are you all able to see my screen now?
No, sir, not yet.
It's maybe, yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
So, India has been very different from most other countries in the world when it comes to storytelling. And I'll get a bit into that. The two large civilizations which have survived over a period of time are India and China. And both have had a very divergent approach to storytelling. China went and believed in the written word, so they would go ahead and document everything. India went ahead and believed in the spoken word, which is why the Vedas, they're a spoken word. And the concept was very simple to say that what is spoken repeatedly over a period of time is understood much better than what is written on a piece of paper. That entire concept of how should a specific story be told is now being revisited by modern management practices. Institutions have now understood and realized that the ability for people to read books, absorb it, and understand it is far worse than the ability to see movies, see stories, or see visualizations. And therefore, many of us today are far more comfortable in watching shorts, watching YouTube, watching Insta, rather than reading a book. This is ancient wisdom. This is not today's wisdom. Our forefathers discovered this a long time back, and therefore, the science of storytelling that evolved in India has followed a completely different path from many other parts of the world. I just wanted to take you back a few steps in time before I fast forward to where we are today. So, why is the story so important? And the story is so important because I can argue about something as much as I want, and it is very possible that the other person does not understand or does not resonate with what I'm trying to say. But if I just go ahead and narrate the same thing in the form of a story, it sticks much more easily. I'll give a few examples later too, so that you can see where I'm going with that. It is also a method for us to communicate our ideas better, right from our Ramayana and Mahabharata to the Iliads from the Western world. All of them have evolved a very powerful way of telling a story where certain morals are embedded in the story itself. So that while you're listening to the story, you're also at the same time appreciating the underlying moral values, appreciating the underlying social and cultural moorings, so that when we start practicing, we have an anchor in a story which is now part of our life. People may question to say, is it not more important to have science and scientific temper? Sure, absolutely. But science and scientific temper by itself will not change the world as much as the ability to excite the world. All of you have heard about Steve Jobs and Apple. Okay. I am not sure how many of you have actually attended virtually any of Steve Jobs' annual sessions when he does the big reveal. When Steve Jobs does it, and now of course Sundar Pichai also does the same thing in Microsoft. When they do it, they actually cast a story. They don't just say, we have now got new features in our product, we are launching Apple 15. No, that's not the way they talk. They build a story around it. And that story is what fascinates people. Why am I talking about Apple and iPhone? I'm talking about Apple because Apple is not the best product in the market. The best product in the market used to be a phone called BlackBerry. BlackBerry is today dead. Nobody uses BlackBerry anymore. And if you really look at what is the difference between a BlackBerry or a Nokia for that matter and an iPhone, it was the ability of Steve Jobs to tell a story which fascinated and gripped its audience. And that audience made Apple one of the best companies in the world. So, some more on that. What do we do with stories? The purpose of a story is to be able to connect emotionally. Why is emotions more important? Because we think with our heart, and that is what helps. Several times you want to convey complex ideas. It is very difficult to do that without getting a story around it. In modern management parlance, you break it down to simple acronyms. Right? So when we say SWOT analysis, why was it that necessary to even coin an acronym called SWOT? You could simply have said, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But that is so much more complex than to say SWOT. Or for that matter, the five forces model, or any of the modern management practices that we talk about. When we talk about a concept, we typically we simplify it by boxing it through a storyline. When you talk about Maslow's hierarchy, you box it in a storyline. You say, this is the way it goes. You come to the top and you've got your nirvana. So we simplify it. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for several of the concepts to be understood. I link it back to our own ancient history or our own Mahabharata. In Mahabharata is one of the most complex stories. Imagine trying to figure out who is black, who is white, who is gray, who is on which side, and why. Had it not been told in the form of stories, it would have been very difficult to grasp it. And those of you who have actually read the Mahabharata, you will understand, you will appreciate that Mahabharata is not one single story. There are stories within stories. And for every character, there are sub-themes and sub-stories. Who is Ghatotkacha, for example, is a story by itself. Why was it that Dronacharya Guru did not side with the Pandavas? Is a story by itself. Why is it that Duryodhana could not get Sri Krishna to be on his side? Is a story by itself. And each of these is a sub-story. So a very complex set of ideas is broken down into simple components just because you're able to string a story out of it. And then it also helps in fostering a sense of belonging. A very simple method of showing empathy is to tell stories. This is what happened with me at so and so time. When you tell me your story, it feels as though it is my own story. The moment you say that, you've already created a sense of belonging. You've broken down barriers of communication, which is why the ability to craft stories is so critical to greasing the world. Will the world work? Of course it can work. But will it work the way we want to work it? Only provided you do all this. Some more on that. 4 forms: the oral, visual, written, digital. Okay. The digital is something that is only of recent vintage. Why? Because we have access to technology now. Can we leverage the technology to make stories easier, faster, better to reach all of us? Of course we can. As I mentioned, we have kathas for a long period of time. We call them Puranas, Pravachanas, Katha Kalakshepas, or go to different parts of India and you will have different forms of storytelling. The jatras which happen in eastern India, to the harikathas and or burakathas which happen in southern India, to the open air theaters which happen in western India. Each of them has evolved as a story form, and it has its own originality, it has its own texture and the ability to thrill. So why are we talking about, and what are we talking about when we say a spoken form of, a verbal form of storytelling? A verbal form of storytelling is seen to be one of the most effective means of transmitting a thought. There are multiple ways of transmitting a thought. In today's world, more and more people are convinced that if I give a report to somebody else, that is good enough. No, it is not. My organization, when we first worked with the World Bank several years ago, we did a lot of work and then eventually produced a report which was about 200 pages thick. And I was very proud of the quality of work that our team had done. And I was in Washington. I met with the person who had commissioned this project. And I said, sir, we have spent a lot of time and effort and have built this entire report for your review. And he looked shocked. He said, Mr. Vinay, do you expect me to have the patience to read a 200-page report? So I said, what do you expect, sir? And he said, I want you to give me one single visual slide. That is all. So my entire 200-page report, I had to convert into one single visual slide. And imagine the power of that one slide to say all that you wanted to say in 200 pages. Of course, those of you who understand this concept in modern management, it is called single slide. Okay, more and more companies nowadays are saying we prefer single slides. They're saying we don't want you to give us full-blown reports. Now, those of you who also understand where I'm going with this is also called infographics or dashboarding. These are modern storytelling practices. Can I convey in a single slide all that I want to talk about? And that is where the practice of storytelling in management comes in. But hold that thought, because it's not simply about being able to convey an idea. There is much more to it. What else are we talking about when we're talking about storytelling in the modern era? These are some of the key components of what storytelling helps in. The first part, and that's the most important part, is are you able to engage? Are you able to connect emotionally? Are you able to create a memory? The first time you meet somebody, let's say you're a marketing person and you meet somebody, what's the first thing that you try to do? You try to find an element of commonality between you and your adversary. Because what you're trying to do is to establish a storyline. Oh, 20 years ago, I was also in Mumbai. So where were you in Mumbai at that time? What have you done? You're trying to emotionally connect. And you'll say, do you remember that rain which happened in Mumbai that time? I was stuck in so-and-so place in that rain. Where were you stuck? Now, has it got anything to do with the commerce or business? Nothing. But you have struck an emotional chord which will help to make the conversation easier. Let us get to the other part, which is inward looking. So I said outward looking, then inward looking. What is it on the inward looking side? How do you build a company culture? How do you get everybody to believe in exactly the same thing? And that can happen only through effective storytelling. In my company, we have what is called a book of stories. And the book of stories is given to everybody so that they enjoy the stories. While reading the stories, they also understand the belief behind that story. It also is helpful in employee engagement. I'm just coming from a meeting with a management school, so I got delayed by a few minutes. And one of the things that I was talking to them, we were recruiting some people from that campus. I said, I want people who are able to tell stories. I want people who are imaginative. I want people who can go beyond giving me the answer to, let us say, what is Miller-Modigliani model? What is Black-Scholes model? What is... So I don't want those questions answered. Those are easy questions and they are not relevant questions. Can you, in that 5-minute or 10-minute or 15-minute interview, convince the person on the other side that you know something and you can engage and convince why you are superior to somebody else? That is the ability to tell your story. Today, quite a few of us lack that because we have never thought that as an important skill. I'll go one step further. Those of you who are into or looking at startups, the biggest challenge for startups is how do I engage with my investor community? Why is it important to engage with an investor community? Because they are the ones who are going to give the money. And unless I tell a story which is pleasing enough, there is no way the investor will put in the money. And you have exactly 5 minutes to be able to do that. It's called, I'm sure some of you know it, it's called the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch means that your story starts by the time you get into the elevator and your story stops by the time you get out of the elevator. So you should have a very powerful story to tell. Those of you who are fans of the Shark Tank, I'm sure by now you know how the Shark Tank works. You are given a limited period of time to tell your story. Now here is an interesting bit for all of you. Next time you watch, and I'm not talking about Shark Tank India, okay? Next time you watch Shark Tank USA, just observe which are the companies which seem to be getting funding more easily. And you'll see that those which are getting funding more easily are not the ones which have a great product or a service. They are the ones where the founder is able to tell a very fascinating story. And that is the importance of being able to tell the story. I mentioned briefly earlier too, but I wanted to again dwell upon it for a moment, which is this entire skill of decision sciences or data interpretation. And a lot of it depends on how do you go ahead and interpret a story or interpret some data. I'll give you my own example. We were working for a bank. I will not tell you the name of the bank. And the bank said that we want you to tell us what will make our customers happy. And when we did the study, we got some very peculiar results. The peculiar result was that people in Mumbai said, you reduce the amount of time that you engage with me as a customer and I'll be more happy. Understandable. You don't have the time, you want to go quickly, get out quickly, seamless process, perfect. But when we asked the same question to people in Bihar and Jharkhand, they came back and said, we are happy when you spend more time with us. Does that seem illogical? It was not illogical for us. We said we perfectly understand where this is coming from. In a place like Bihar or Jharkhand, customers are saying that we feel a sense of empathy with you as a bank. Therefore, you spend more time, empathy value increases. Whereas people in Mumbai are saying, we don't care for empathy. We care for business. See the story? And the moment we told this story to the bank said, aha, Now we understand why our customers are behaving like this. But you have to be able to tell that story, right? Every data point has got its own story to tell, provided you are willing to dig deep enough. All right, let me move on. I'm sure all of you have heard about it, but I thought I should just put it in context. It has become very popular nowadays to have movies being played as part of management schools curricula to teach people the art or the principles of management. During my time, we had the English movie. I think it was the 12. I forget the name of the movie, where you had 12 jury members who had to find out, who to pronounce a verdict of somebody who is guilty or not guilty. The movie was played, and then we were asked, what did you gain from the movie? What did you do? What did you not do? What would you have done? Why did somebody behave like that? And suddenly, it's no longer a movie. Suddenly, it's no longer a story. Suddenly, it becomes teaching of principles of management. Lagan, of course, everybody knows. Why did Lagan become famous? As a means of teaching. Lagan was taught because it taught things like how do you build a team, how do you deal with adversities, how do you come across from somebody who cannot do something to somebody who starts believing in yourself. So there's a whole lot of principles which were taught through that. I'm not as familiar with the movie Ashtachama. I'm sure that's a Telugu movie, but I'm sure some others are. But that was taught at the Indian School of Business as part of their entrepreneurship course. So again, a lot of stories help in a lot of ways to imbibe some of the principles of management. If I flip to the other side, only those companies which are able to tell a story are able to survive. Right? So in a management school, you need a story to be able to teach principles of management. In the real world, you need to have a story for you to succeed. So let me give you a story. My career, as Professor Nair told, started exactly 30 years ago in 1992. Those of you who remember 1992, it was famous for the famous Harshad Mehta scam. But it was also famous for a different reason. Two companies came out with their public issues at the same time, more or less. One was this company called Infosys, which nobody had heard about. And another was a company called Satyam, which was coming out with a follow-on offer, rights offer. I used to be an investment banker in those days, so lots of people asked me, where should we invest? Should we invest our money in Infosys or should we invest our money in Satyam? I, being a finance person, I said, look, I understand the difference between the two. Infosys is a brand new company, no track record, no history of shares. Satyam, already established track record. I said, close your eyes and put your money in Satyam. And I was wrong. I was wrong because Mr. Narayan Murthy wove a story which was so powerful that it became a far bigger brand than Satyam could become. I don't know how many of you know about the background of Infosys when it started. But when it started, Infosys was one of the first companies in India which started talking about human capital in their financial statements. And it caught the attention of the world. It was the first company which used data analytics as a method to write the management report, because they wanted to ensure that specific words were used in the management report which would excite an investor to read the report in a certain way. And that is the power of creativity. That's the power of using storytelling. Those of you who you consume paperboard products. I'm sure you're all aware of the stories which go with every one of the drinks that you have. Likewise, when you talk about Reliance, Reliance has gone ahead and ensured that its ethos and memory is embedded in the Indian mind, not merely through what they say or do, but also through the movies that they have on Reliance, on Ambani's. The Tata Group, anybody who joins the Tata Group, one of the first things that happens to them is they are actually made to go through the history of the entire group as a part of their process of learning, no matter which company they join. Exactly the same thing happens to Mahindra Group. Exactly the same thing happens to Aditya Birla Group. Mama Earth, a company that many of you are familiar with, which came out with an IPO recently, built its entire brand based on ability to tell stories. KFC, McDonald's, 4 stars, 4 seasons. Every one of these companies has gone ahead and promoted its brand through its stories. Today, you want to learn more about them. There are autobiographical books written by the founders of these companies, which are available for you to learn the story. And the more you know the story, the more you believe in the story, the more you build customer loyalty, the more you build trust with that organization. That's the power of storytelling. So how do you go about doing it? And the way to go about doing it is not very difficult. I think what you should ask yourself is, do you know how to tell a story or not? In my company, there is a very simple test that I put everybody to. I say, you decide your story. You are given 10 minutes to prep yourself up and 10 minutes to go ahead and tell a story, any story. And next time some of you, and I'm not talking about lecturers or professors. I'm talking about students who are perhaps listening into this webinar. Next time, try to do this with yourself. Say that you are going to tell a story, not a known story, not a story that you have read, not a story that you know, not a story that you have heard about, not about a movie, a story that you make up on the spot. Tell that story for 10 minutes. And that's the challenge that we put in my company. You have to stand in front of an audience and say, this is the story, in 10 minutes. Now, 10 minutes might sound very simple, but try it out. You'll figure out how difficult it is to hold an audience for 10 minutes. So how do you go about doing it? And these are some of the tricks of how do you go about making an effective story. First, you need to immerse your audience in the story. Tell a personal story. Create suspense. Bring characters to life. Don't just say a very dull story. Bring out the characters. This man was so angry. He was waving his hands up and down. He was not willing to listen to anything. Now there is life to the character. Okay? Show, don't tell. So what I'm doing with you all right now is bad storytelling. Because I'm not showing you anything. Or am I? Then leave something that people will always remember. Right? At the end, all that you want is a positive takeaway. So those of you who have been listening to me, are seeing me, I'm sure you can see a nice frame in the background. So that's also storytelling. That also comes from the fact that we live in a world where stories are more important than every day. That's all I have to say. Few slides. I hope I'm okay on time, and that is something Professor Nair will tell me. With your permission, Professor Nair,
yes,
I
sir.
just have one more slide to show.
Sure, please, sir.
I am on the board of a company called Obotar, and that is the reason I believe so strongly in what I'm talking about. Obotar is an organization which is all about storytelling and all about helping young people get into the habit of telling stories. Because once you do that, you are then ready to face the actual world, to face the real world. It is not the formulas, it is not the what you learn by heart in management schools which is important. It is the ability for you to stand out and say, hey, I am different. You need to watch out because I am who I am, because this is my story. So we have two roles that we are looking out for. Anybody who's interested can reach out. We're looking out for OBO campus ambassadors, and we're looking out for OBO interns. And there are different requirements for both of those. Any students who are listening into the webinar and are interested can please write down to that email ID and be prepared for an exciting story. Thank you, Professor Nair. I have nothing else to share, but I'm happy to take as many questions.
Thank you so much, sir. The slide can be there, sir, so that students can write down or can copy if possible. Thank you, sir. Sir, an excellent presentation, sir, because you have started beautifully saying that a tough subject also can be made it easy through a story. It was so connective, sir. And also very appreciative that you have connected exactly with all the ethos and epics of India, which have a base of storytelling, because we have made everything into stories, that you have beautifully said. And when we talk about all these things, sir, one question that arises is, in storytelling, how to make it more intense, or how to, as you said, it is to connect with the customer or the employees or the culture or whatever it is in the organization. So what is the base of a good story? Maybe is it the ethical attitude or the strength of conviction, or what is that? The base of connecting so immensely to the customer or to the employee or to anyone who is listening?
I think that's an excellent question. Excellent because a good story is one which is able to simplify the most complex concept.
Yeah, true.
So I'm not even going into, what should I say? Is it talking about a certain moral, or is it talking about a certain principle? That's all secondary. Yeah. How do you make the most complex subject seem more simple? With your permission, I'll give a very small example. And since my mother tongue is Telugu, I will try and see if any of you can understand what I'm saying. When I was really, really young, and I did it with my children too. So my father wanted to teach me the Ramayana. And too young, I was probably 3 years old or 4 years old. So I really didn't have the memory or the ability to grasp big concepts. And he just said, those of you who know Telugu will probably understand what I'm saying. He said, and many of you I'm sure know also this one. He said, Patte Kotte Teche. Now those of you who understand Telugu, you will know what it means, So basically in 3 words, the entire story of Ramayana was explained. And when I did the same thing with my children at that same age, I used exactly the same concept. And then their curiosity goes and says, Dad, can you explain what does that mean? Then you have got the hook. So 2 things. So the first part is make it simple.
Simplify.
Second is get a hook. If there is a hook, the story is sold.
Yeah, truly said, sir. Making it very simple and making them to connect or to make learning rediscovery. As you said earlier, it is making or rediscovering the learning patterns. Is it this the thing that you made it clear through this example also, sir? Thank you. So, is it audible, sir?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah. Sir, yeah, very rightly said. As you said, we teachers also, we need to, as it is already done in almost all the B schools, and we teachers are already doing it in our classrooms, making every story to be built in the classroom, as you said, to make it more simpler to the students, and it becomes more effective in its form. Thank you so much, sir, for with your discussion. You have made a beautiful a kind of discussion that storytelling is again interesting or effective form of communication wherever it is. Thank you so much, sir. It was an excellent presentation where all the students, the teaching staff, everyone were benefited. And I thank you for this thoughtful and thorough session today, sir. And also I thank Mr. Sudhir Sharma, for the president of AIMS, the secretary, the regional vice president, Dr. Narayan Reddy, the board members, the technical staff of AIMS, and all teaching staff and other the student participants who have spent their valuable time for this session. Thank you so much. Thank you, one and all. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.